What's up, KGS Head Master here. Today, going for the look of a man who either wished he'd written a book but never did, or probably more likely wrote a book, never got it published, just wasn't good enough. But the problem with these specs is that they're for a long distance, not short. So I'm going to just do the old traditional literary bookshop thing of popping them up there. And wishing you all welcome to today's live stream on books. Different flavour, I think, from FIFA, movies, music, but I promise to give you the outcome of my favourite films, and here they are. And I tried not to cheat. I've got them written down. So I've got here, envelope, as promised. Number one, Godfather, and I didn't cheat by putting Godfather 1 or 2. I think you just take the fact they're both great movies. Number two, I hope I mentioned this one, Raging Bull. If I didn't, that's a real miss on my part. I looked back through the video and thought, did I put that in there? So Raging Bull would be a number two. De Niro, magnificent movie, shot in black and white, didn't need to be just perfect. So Godfather, Raging Bull. And number three, just for a bit of modernity, a bit of freshness, because your top threes, top tens, they're always changing, right? Captain America Civil War. I think right now that's the best of a big series of films, and a few people said they looked to that. So hi, Salt and Vinegar, how you doing? Good to see you. If you've got any comments on books, any questions about books, I've got a flavour of things to run through, but there's nothing worse than me just running through what I like. I looked at a few lists leading into this. What's the top 100 books? What's the top 50 books? There was a recent independent survey of the top 40 books to read during lockdown. The problem with books is that when they get lists like that, they tend to jump all over the place in trying to encourage you to read a bit of this and a bit of that. But everyone's got tastes. Everyone's got what they're into. So I thought I might be starting off a bit controversially by telling you about some things you shouldn't read. So the Bible, yeah, you can read a bit of the Bible. How? And actually, do you know what? Why not? It's a great read in parts, but I think it's one of those books, a bit like a reference book that you want to dip in and out of. You know, the kind of logical storyline. You know, there's lots of different authors. It's like short stories all woven together, and we'll come back to short stories later on. Have I read any Grisham books? Yeah, and I don't mind Grisham, thanks, Hattie. I prefer other thrillers and crime, but I like Grisham. I don't always like the film adaptations. Some are better than others. Here's some things not to read. It's terribly badly written. Made a huge amount of money probably because of the film and that kind of stuff. But wow. Bad. Don't read it. Watch the film by all means, or read it, but read it with a kind of thinking, I won't write like that. Okay, pop that to one side for you. Have I ever read the Harry Potter series? Good question, Joe. Here's the thing. I often don't read as many books as I should because I'm often returning to old favourites. And one of the things I always used to be doing every summer holidays was, and every time a new Harry Potter was coming out, I kind of lived through the era of them coming out. So I'd read the first one. The first two were out, I think, by the time I got into Philosopher's Stone. So I read the Philosopher's Stone, loved it. Chamber of Secrets, loved it. Third one was coming out, went back, read the first two again. Fourth one comes out, went back, read the first three again. Fourth one coming out, and then the last one comes out, it's like, oh my God, it's enormous. And they got bigger and bigger and bigger. And everybody couldn't wait for it. Now you look back and think they're too big. There needs to be a lot kind of chopped out there. So I've read Harry Potter and Philosopher's Stone innumerable times, read them all at least a few times. I think they're great evidence that actually when you make movies of books, you need to change it up a bit, because the more they change it up, the better the movies were. Hilary Mantel's series on Thomas Cromwell, Wolf Hall. Absolutely brilliant. The first two, I haven't read the third one. That's just come out, the kind of one that wraps it up. I've got to be honest, I quite like the play adaptations as well. Didn't really like the TV adaptations, but the books are magnificent. And if you haven't read her short stories, Hilary Mantel, it's something like the private tales of the assassinations of Margaret Thatcher, or something to do with assassination Margaret Thatcher. It's not left-wing kind of like, let's kill conservatives. It certainly is not. It's just a short story, but they're great as well. Hilary Mantel is, I think, the only author that has a portrait up in the British Library. Unless anybody wants to tell me any different. She's the only one I've ever seen in there. Have I read his Dark Materials series? No spoilers, please. No, I have. Thanks, Joe. And they are absolutely magnificent. I think they get a bit weaker after the three. I think the TV adaptation, the film adaptation have not really done it justice. I think the books are brilliant and worth working through. Now, a lot of people, go back to Hal's point about the Bible, don't like the Philip Pullman because of the the reference or lack of or slight diversion from spirituality, themes of Christianity. I think you can put that to one side. I think that's whether you want to adopt that view or not. I'm sure Pullman did write it with some intent, but I think you can just enjoy the stories. I think they are fantastic stories, great. And they're not just children's books either. I think a lot of overlap with Harry Potter, with Philip Pullman, with quite a few other authors where it's not just children. Have I read any Kathy Reich books? Now, that's ringing a bell. Hattie, give me a clue, because I don't think I have, but her name is ringing a bell with me. Have you got one you could recommend to me to read? I'm going to recommend another one you shouldn't read. I did. I went through them all. They're massive. And we all know the TV series outstrips by a long way the books. The books kind of stop. I think he ran out of ideas. They're deceptively engaging, but they're not well written, and they're just far too big for what they are. So by all means do if you're a real fan, or if you went to the books first, but a bit like Da Vinci Code, don't do it to yourself. And on the subject of what do I think about Treasure Island? I think Treasure Island is a great book. Robert Louis Stevenson obviously often comes up in the top 10, not just of children's fiction, but of fiction of all time. It's a good question, how. I think it was at Jamaica Inn. I think it kind of, lots of characters in it. I think that I read that when I was quite young. Maybe it was read to me. I don't think so. And I think I read it myself. And I haven't been back to it. Maybe I need to go back to it. Now, the play of Treasure Island is coming up. That's the NT Live this week, right? I think, Treasure Island. So it's on Thursday, so it's worth watching, 7 p.m. But I think it's great. Game of Thrones is the best TV series to ever created. Changed my mind. Never read the books though. No, I think the TV series is great. And I think it's very watchable, and I think it is drawn from the books. But again, the more removed it becomes from the books, possibly the better it becomes until the end. The books are engaging, but they're just not worth the effort. She's a pathologist, Kathy Reich. Is that her character, Kathy Reich? So still trying to work out where I know Kathy Reich from. That's giving me more of a clue, Hattie, as to wanting to read. So is she a character? Is she an author? It's ringing bells, but I have to confess I haven't read any Kathy Reich, and so do steer me in the right direction of what I should read of hers. Great book, but impenetrable. Lawrence Durrell wrote the Alexandria Quartet. Is it quintet? I'm sure it's quartet. Starting off with Justine. Brilliant, beautiful. Led me to read The Black Book. Impenetrable. Nothing like the rest of his family. So if you ever read that and you can get through it and you can enjoy it, please let me know. You're a better reader than I am. Maybe I ought to give it another go. It was a few years ago, probably 15, 20, 25. But I've always kept it as a reminder that you don't have to persevere with a book if you're really not enjoying it. Now, where else can we go? Best books about sport and conversion. So there's loads of books about sport. King of the World, War Baby. There are books about boxing. Loads of great football books based on real life. Football Against the Enemy, Simon Cooper. Fear and Loathing in La Liga, the kind of competition between Real Madrid, Barcelona. I think David Peace is a great author. And this book, The Damned United, about Brian Clough's time with Leeds, is one of the best read for any sports fans. Takes you back to an era of the 70s. Leeds were in their pomp. Brian Clough was like the manager of the moment, and it just didn't work. It's a great, great book. The Secret Footballer is a fantastic book. Absolutely. I agree with that sort of vinegar. If I could be a book character, who would I be? Let me jump to that now if I can. Where is the book I'm looking for? I've got a little pile of stuff on the go. Excuse me while my face darts around the screen. I am going to say that I would rather be... it will come to me in a minute. Bernie Gunther, Philip Kerr, started kicking off with March Violets. He's a ex-policeman turned detective in kind of age of Nazi Germany. He's hard-bitten. It reads a bit like a Raymond Chandler, a bit like a Dashiell Hammett. He's kind of this hard-bitten detective. He's kind of no nonsense, takes it, gives it verbally, physically, but he wants to get to the truth. And in Nazi Germany, that is not always an easy thing to do. Philip Kerr passed away relatively recently, which is unfortunate, at a very early age. It was a great, great shame. Not in the recent crisis, but a bit before. But he ended up writing 13, 14 novels, and the last two were when he knew he was dying. And he deviated onto other things, but he kept this Bernie Gunther series going. Starts off with March Violets, which basically is a reference to people that, like violets coming up in March, that comes from all these people that suddenly became Nazis overnight in the kind of early 30s. And Bernie Gunther is one of the great, I think, crime thriller detective characters. And to have that much grit, determination, and integrity is an amazing thing. So he would be my choice. The Secret Full of Fantastic. Worst book, literally anything by Michael Morpurgo. How? I've got a feeling maybe you've been made to read too many Michael Morpurgos, because they are great books. Born to Run, real tearjerker. All right, Kenzuki's Kingdom. What's the one about the cat that's to do with the Savoy Hotel that my daughter loves? Oh crikey, it'll come back to me. But Kapinski, no, that's the name of a hotel chain. But Michael Morpurgo, Private Peaceful, obviously, Warhorse, all that kind of stuff. I'm trying to think of some kind of other references. But Born to Run's a real tearjerker if you go back to that one. Senna, the biography is excellent. Again, as another, absolutely, Mr. Crowhill, as another sporting. I think the biographies, I'm not going to kind of steer into that genre today, because I was trying to think about how do I limit this. I did want to mention a little bit of history. I think Ian Kershaw is one of the best, because I mentioned Bernie Gunther and the Nazis. Certainly he's one of the best authors on the modern world and about the Nazis. Kershaw, so this is to Helen back, Europe, 14 to 49, so kind of First World War to the end of the Second World War. Just think Kershaw's a great writer, very readable. And where else can we go? Let's talk about things that were turned into, while we're on the subject of war, probably the greatest novel ever written about a wartime experience, and all the things around that. Birdsong, Sebastian Faulks. Now, Sebastian Faulks has written a lot of other books, but for whatever reason, he hit upon a real classic. And again, this is one of those books you have to read. Stick it on the list. Lockdown Mode, Birdsong. It's not just about World War One. It's not just a love story. It's not just a reminiscence. It's a load of things. I put it up there. It's a very different book from L.P. Hartley's The Go-Between, but in terms of the emotion, The Go-Between, of course, the past is a different country. They do things differently there. I think we'll all discover when we come out of this current crisis that the past was indeed a different country, and they did and will do things differently there, and we will in the future. But I would put the L.P. Hartley's The Go-Between as a real emotional roller coaster, something from a different time. It feels like an older novel, but it's not. It is actually quite 20th century. And I would put Sebastian Faulks' Birdsong as a completely different type of book up there with that kind of emotional roller coaster. Robert Harris books, absolutely. So Robert Harris, everything. I got into Robert Harris with the obvious entry of Fatherland, went on to Enigma, Archangel. Obviously, Fatherland's about the Nazis winning World War II. Enigma's about the Enigma code-breaking machine. Archangel was about Stalin's son surviving him and wanting to take over the ruling of Russia. Everything through to his trilogy on Cicero. What else have we got recently? There's something about the Pope, was there? Conclave, which I haven't read yet. That's kind of, I got 2 copies of that, so I must read at least one. I'll come back later on to books where you've got multiple copies, because you buy one because you're not sure if you've read it yet, or you loved it so much you think you've lost it and then you find it again, or you just steal someone else's copy of a book accidentally and completely unwittingly and realize that you can go live and say, I need to give you your copy back. So Robert Harris, absolutely. Poetry, big fan of Byron, Shelley and Yeats. I love poetry. I love all kinds of poetry, but here's Dylan Thomas, a little bit about his time in America, which is a complete roller coaster of kind of experience. Dylan Thomas was a man who lived a certain way. It's not necessarily a way we would all choose to live, but it's certainly enjoyable. But you can't not read or listen to Richard Burton reading Under Milk Woods. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Brian Patton, I'm going to show my kind of age, my hero. Roger McGough. I think more currently people like Simon Armitage, Ian McMillan. Ian McMillan's what a beautiful book. This is a signed copy of Kid by Simon Armitage. Heard him read poems from this and kind of future collections. Brilliant. Something you might not have stumbled across if you like poetry. You can see I'm more modern. I've got some more Roger McGough on the go. My Family and Other Superheroes. Jonathan Edwards. I think that's a great kind of modern collection, his poetry. So poetry, absolutely. If we're going to go back, Byron, Shelley, Keats, more clever than some of what John Donne has written. The metaphysical, things like The Flea, just unbelievably clever. So go all the way back to the metaphysical poets, Andrew Marvell, of course, as well. I struck the board and cried no more. There we go. Times when your chariot drawing near. There's no way you enjoy poetry after having to analyse every single word, every single. Do you know what? I think it's the ability to analyse poetry, that when you can read it for yourself and you're choosing what to read, that helps you enjoy it. So all that analysis, I promise you, is not wasted. My parents have Under Milk Wood on vinyl. I sampled it on. Oh, Joe, that's amazing. Listen to that. Voluntarily not a school project. Good for you. Definitely. If that's the Richard Burton, then definitely come back to that. What else are we talking about? Oh, here we go. Here's the March Violets. Here's the man. Bernie Kerr. What does it say? Bernie Gunther is an iconic creation. I know that's quoted by the Times. They're not my friends at the moment, but that's true. Bernie Gunther is an iconic creation, and if you read March Violets, you're guaranteed you're in for a really good fun kind of series of books with that character running through kind of Nazi Germany and beyond. He survives the war, comes out the other side, and gets involved in hunting down Nazis all over Europe and the world, lives in South America for a while. And often some of the later books are reflections on times before, so they don't run chronologically, they jump around a bit, but it's really, really good. Where else can we go after that? Books that were, I'm pretty sure The English Patient, I was going to say won the Booker Prize. It says it won the Booker Prize. It's a great film. Ray Fiennes, Kristen Scott Thomas. Is it Kristen Scott Thomas or Kirsten Scott Thomas? I think it's Kristen Scott Thomas. But again, a beautifully shot movie. It's Sam Mendes. But the book is par excellence. Absolutely amazing. When's it going back to? 1999, 1992. Wow, that's old for some of you. But really, really worth a read. I haven't touched on American literature yet. Now, a lot of you will be thinking, oh yeah, Catcher in the Rye. I think it's very worthy, and I'm going to avoid trying to be worthy if I can in talking about books. I didn't like it. It was okay. I think it is probably a great book. I can see why other people do. I prefer things like Raymond Carver, what we talk about when we talk about love. I think that's great. I think that's fantastic. Gore Vidal's brilliant books, Julian and Creation. Now, do you know what? I've not read anything of Gore Vidal. So thank you. That's a really good tip. I'm going to kind of note that one down. I'll come back to the comments later on. Thank you very much for picking up on that. That's not something I can comment on because I haven't read. And I think that's one of the purposes of this, is to have a bit of a dialogue to say, what have you read? What have you not read? What would you like to read? So I'd recommend that. I've been recommended Philip Roth. I kicked off with Patrimony, which is more a memoir about his kind of his father's kind of end of life, which is kind of subtle at the moment. And I've dived into American Pastoral, and I understand that there's divisions of opinion within the English department on this. Some love it, some hate it. I'm going to dive in. Having enjoyed Patrimony, I'm going to dive into that. And while we're on American, if I go to Mr. Smith, I'm sure you know Mr. Smith in the English department, recommended Stoner, brilliant book. And look what it says: the greatest novel you've never read. It wasn't the greatest novel I'd never read, but it was a great novel. A great novel I had read, Revolutionary Road, Yates. Yates came up earlier. I think, did you mean Keats? I'm not sure. Anyway, but Raymond Yates, Revolutionary Road, amazing in terms of American literature. Where else do we go in terms of things that I'd recommend? So, of course, you all love Michael Frayn, don't you? You've all probably had to read Spies. Go back to his early stuff, Tin Men, Russian Interpreter, that kind of stuff. It's actually really enjoyable, quite funny in places. I think Spies is a great book too, but it's probably just, having studied it, a bit like the poetry angle, it just probably doesn't sit up well for you. But Michael Frayn is a great author, playwright, intellectual, and worth a read. And these are kind of, like novellas. These are very readable in double quick time, probably a day, 2 days for some of you. We haven't touched on plays yet. Let's go to some plays. My favorite play ever to have seen and read, again, it's kind of a Richard Burton angle going on, John Osborne's Look Back in Anger. The film version starred Richard Burton. It's a magnificent film, black and white, very earthy, very real, kind of post-war Britain, red brick universities, angry young men. That's the thing. Angry young men, kind of like, what's the world going to do for me? What can I do for the world? Brilliant play. From the same kind of era, kind of, again, you'll get my background. The Birthday Party, Sheila Delaney's Taste of Honey. I think that was on recently. Jodie Prenger was in that. But again, probably the cleverest British playwright going, who's just had his latest and most probably his last play released in the West End. Obviously got cut short by the pandemic. Was Tom Stoppard. Leopoldstadt was on. But Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead, which is obviously a taken from Hamlet, where they disappear to, and the Real Inspector Hound. Funny, clever, and there's a whole host of plays, and they really are worth a read. You don't have to read Shakespeare. You can. Shakespeare's great, but some stuff, and there's obviously lots more modern stuff around. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but the play I've seen most recently I've enjoyed, and certainly worth a read. Lots more modern stuff around. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but the play is really, really good. So James, hello James, how are you? James, come in with an opinion. Why not? Ask a question. It's just simply, I'm kind of saying to you, read it. It's about 4 days in the life of a tramp, and it's Ripley Vogel by Robert McLean Wilson. And I think this changed the face of Irish literature in the late 80s, early 90s. Hope I'm around the right period. And that's a phenomenal piece of literature. Very, very clever, very eloquent, very engaging, very thought-provoking. 4 days in the life of a tramp. I think it's something to behold, something to remember. And whilst we're on Irish literature, a lot of people say James Joyce, Ulysses, short stories. Go short stories. Go Dubliners. Brilliant, great way in. Really enjoyable read. An insight into the life of people in Dublin. Every short story is another insight into another little world of people's lives around that time. Brendan Behan, Bolster Boy, classic of its time. Really good book. You've got to be up for it. But probably, Joyce, kick off with that. While I'm on favourite books, and I mentioned Ripley Vogel was one of my top 10. I don't know how many female authors I've read, but Virginia Woolf. Probably can't get enough of reading Virginia Woolf to like us again. It's very readable. It's not a huge book, but it's very meaningful. It's probably one of the most meaningful books you'll ever read. And on to kind of meaningful books and kicking my top 10, but also back to the theme of how many times I've stolen someone else's book. Waterland by Graham Swift. It's a beautiful book. Elegiac, if that's the right way of pronouncing that word. It's beautiful, and I probably so desperately wanted to make sure I had my copy that when I was living in a flat with a friend and then moved out to buy my first house, I probably thought, well, I'm not sure which copies mine is. Accidentally took both, so I should be returning one of them now. I've found both. I was looking for it for today. It's the first time I've spotted, I promise, that I have both. Iris Murdoch is one of my favourite authors ever. She would certainly make my top 10. I think her first novel is amazing. Under the Net is very clever. Lots of little vignettes of life in London around that time. And but The Sea, again, a Booker Prize winner, but probably this slightly bigger tome, but not unreadable. In fact, kind of deeply moving. But Iris Murdoch, deeply philosophical, thoughtful, real. You can engage with the characters. Lots of it set around London or areas that people in London would recognise, even though she herself was from Ireland. That's brilliant. I haven't mentioned Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. Again, I think, Sri, thank you for that. I don't want to get too worthy. And again, To Kill a Mockingbird, I think, is a brilliant book, and it's one I'm assuming most people have read. Ghost of the sequel that I'm not sure should have ever been released, but let's not do Harper Lee an injustice. But To Kill a Mockingbird is certainly one of the best books ever written and read, and a great film adaptation as well. Unfortunately, there was going to be a theatre, kind of a play adaptation as well. Aaron Sorkin was doing the script, the play, putting it to the stage. I think Rhys Ifans was going to be in it. That's been knocked on the head. It's a great shame. I've read about 2 books in the last 3 years in that depth. Okay, let's try and give you some things, Salt and Vinegar. What can we give you to read to get you back into your depth? Let me suggest something to you. Is this going to do it for you? Pat Barker, Regeneration. Now, bear in mind, I try and read about a book a week. And if there's something a bit longer that takes me a bit longer, I don't beat myself up over it. If it takes me 10 days, 2 weeks, that's fine. I'm currently reading John Buchan's 39 Steps. Okay, so that's a little crime thriller. It's kind of Predator 1. We all know the movie, we all know the character, Richard Hannay. it's it's easy. Ivan, hello, has to be the Hungry Caterpillar. Layers like an onion, absolutely. But this is an easy read. It's really, this is a pick up and can't put it down. You might get it done in a day, two at the most. It's really, really easy read. Another book very similar to that, Get Carter. If you've seen the film with Michael Caine, I can't remember what the original title of the book was. Mine's called Get Carter. I picked it up one evening, started to read it, just stayed awake all night, read it, finished it. Other books will take you a couple of days. But if you know a little bit about history, if you know a little bit about war, if you've enjoyed films like 1917, which didn't get a mention on my movie run, Pat Barker Regeneration, and if you enjoy it, there's a trilogy, so you can read the first one, love it, and then move on. So if you haven't read a book in a long time and you want to get into reading again, I think, what am I going to do during lockdown? It's not watching TV, playing video games. And I suppose one of the things I'm trying to suggest throughout this whole series of videos is that you can enjoy all these things. You just do them all in moderate. You make time for all the things, and reading not to be ignored, hence why it was really important. So I'll give it a go at some point. Thank you, Silver. Which one, Regeneration or 39 Steps? I'd probably go Regeneration, and say there's a trilogy in there if you get into it. Things that, okay, unpopular opinion. Agatha Christie is not a good writer, but she's a good storyteller. It's great crime, great thriller, so they're worth reading for that, but she's not a great writer. And some of the TV adaptations just don't work. I was really disappointed with The Pale Horse. I quite like the ABC Murders, but as well done. But I love the fact they're trying new things to try and bring it to life. So that's really good. How long do we think it'll be in lockdown? Regeneration, sort of, yeah, absolutely. How long do it be in lockdown? Another 4 weeks? Time for 4 books. What about that? Time for 4 books. I think who knows? But don't read Agatha Christie. If you want to read crime, detective, Raymond Chandler, The Long Goodbye, cannot go wrong. Absolutely stunning. I've likened him to Bernie Gunther, but actually Bernie Gunther's likened, to kind of Philip Marlowe, the detective. Absolutely amazing. Dashiell Hammett's Thin Man, brilliant. Rumpole of the Bailey. This is the first Rumpole. They've just started to re-release them. They're a bit flimsy, actually. I can't believe they're charging £7-8 for something that feels like it's printed on rice paper. But Rumpole of the Bailey stories are brilliant. They're fun. They're witty. Rumpole the Bailey and the Penge Bungalow Murders. Okay, just to make the point. Go dip into Sherlock Holmes. Again, what's that? It's kind of very small book, probably at least 10 stories in there. You've got Return of Sherlock Holmes, the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes, The Study in Scarlet's a very small book, the first one's the way in. If you've enjoyed the TV series and you want to see what the reference points are, they're brilliant. Reading now, Reitzard Kapuski's Travels with Herodotus. Now, Travels with Herodotus is fantastic. I didn't know the author's name, but I have dipped into kind of sections of that people have sent me. And actually, if you go back to Herodotus, obviously the earliest historians, Herodotus, Strabo, when they captured everything going on in the world, magnificent. That's a second recommendation I've picked up. So I've got a bit of Gore Vidal. I'm not sure about the Cathy Reich because I've not really had that unpacked for me, but Travels with Herodotus, absolutely on that. Thank you. But the original kind of spy novel, Riddle of the Sands, Erskine Chalmers. So that's, if you want to go back to where spy novels began, you go to 39 Steps. This is the first one. This is all about the Germans are coming. What are we going to do about it? Right, let's get in a boat and see what we can find out and try and stop them. It's all mad, kind of wacky, very British, when in fact Erskine Chalmers was Irish. But really good, great fun. Crime, thriller novels begin. Where did it all start? In terms of where they arrived, you've got people these days like Mick Herron, Slow Horses, got a series of books. Jackson Lamb's the main character. If you want to laugh Jackson Lamb as the central character, this slightly overbearing, rude, unkempt character who does everything in his power to be as obnoxious as possible while he's running this team of outcasts from the world of MI5, is great. And yet he always kind of saves the day in some kind of quirky modern thriller way. So it's sort of like Spooks, but for the also-rans, for the bad guys, for the slow horses who reside in Slough House, hence Slow Horses. But my favourite thriller novel of all time, Looking for Alaska by John Green, all-time favourite. Read it about 4 times, still pulls on my heartstrings. Thank you, Salt and Vinegar. That's a good recommendation. I don't know that at all. I'm going to park that one as well. That's going to be on my 4-week lockdown reading list now. Looking for Alaska, John Green. Thank you. You could go for any Le Carré novel. But sorry, James, Sam Williams, free as in freedom. Okay, is that Sam Williams, free as in freedom? Okay, is that the title? Okay, it's another one by Untold Times. I think everyone reads Honourable Schoolboy less, which is the second one in the Carla trilogy, and then picks up again with Smiley's People at the end. But The Spy Came In From the Cold, again, another great film. It's slow but not too slow. It's engaging without being overbearing. The characters are great, so really like that. But in terms of modern, literature as well, I'm sure a few of you are fans of Ben Aronovich, the Rivers of London series. That's brilliant, quirky, mythical. It kind of ties in a bit of mythical kind of sci-fi legend with the whole British crime thriller scene, which is fantastic. And I've mentioned in terms of films, let's go back to, I don't mind a bit of the graphic novel. I once interviewed somebody and said to them, do you think children should be allowed to read graphic novels? And they thought I was referring to something slightly unseemly, and said, and I said, no, like as in kind of picture books, as in, and they went, well, no, I'm not sure they should. I actually disagree with them, because actually, I think, things like, if you're not finding reading easy and you want to find your way back in, I think graphic novels are perfect, and there are so many, and obviously manga is a huge thing these days as well. But these are two of my favourites. Obviously, Batman series, and I've mentioned already Captain America: Civil War. And what's interesting about this is it deviates entirely from the film. The film and the graphic novel of Civil War are not based on each other, or hardly at all. So you can enjoy both. Which I think is fantastic. Where else are we going to? Let's talk about things again that were kind of made into films. So this is interesting. Princess Bride. By William Goldman. So this was a film turned into a book, which reads a bit like a script, or was it a book? This was a film turned into a book, which reads a bit like a script, or was it a book turned into a film? It's a good read. It's a really good read. And if you know the film Princess Bride, and a lot of you will, Andre the Giant, and characters like that, lots of kind of famous lines and quotes from it. But this is a really good kind of read if you want to read something that came from the movies first and foremost. Other great books that were made into movies: Dr. Zhivago, a great book and a great movie. Boris Pasternak, J.G. Ballard, Empire of the Sun, great book and great movie. Was it one of the earliest outings for? It was Christian Bale? Could be wrong about that. Trying to think who the young man in it is. But it's a great movie and a great book. Not a great movie, but a decent movie, a very British movie, but a really good book. Lucky Jim, Kingsley and Miss. You probably will know Martin and Miss, his son, London Fields and all that, but totally different writer. And this is obviously about education, it's about schools, it's about teachers, it's about schools, it's about teachers. And similarly, quite a hard-bitten, angry young man, British movie, but a really good book, Room at the Top, John Brain. It's kind of a breakthrough novel in terms of the angry young man era. How are we doing for time? Oh, crikey, we've run on. I've done half an hour. So let's just finish up on, are there any outstanding questions? Afternoon, Abdullah. How are you? Good to see you. Hope you haven't come in just on the back of this. I wanted to mention a couple of different books as well, which aren't related to just being novels or history. So things like Malcolm Gladwell, a kind of philosophy, theoretical philosophy, and I like as well Freakonomics, Super Freakonomics as well by those guys. But Malcolm Gladwell, Blink, lots of short stories about philosophical ideas about how the world works. Now you can thin slice things, which I adopt with admirable kind of regularity. And Matthew Syed Bounce, we all know about Matthew Syed and kind of black box thinking. This is where it kind of all started for him, which is great. So I think if you want to read something that's outside the boxes to do with sport and repetition and how things don't just happen by accident, they happen because the right things are in place, the right mechanisms. And I think this is, well, like happy accidents in the world. There's lots of great books of them. So as ever, nobody got my top 3 movies, so there wasn't a £10 or £20 gift voucher going out to anybody. If you want to try and guess my top 3 books, they will be in the collection of ones I've shown you. And if they're not, if I kind of go, oh, I didn't show them that one, I will make it 3 of the ones I have shown you. So all you have to do is, don't play Warzone all the time. In the same way I can't play for them. I wanted to mention Wise Children, and because Emma Rice, Knee High, or as was, Wise Children's Her New Theatre Company, and again, probably one of the greatest writers of our time. So not women writers, but one of our greatest writers. Iris Murdoch, I mentioned before, Angela Carter as well. And I also wanted to mention, crikey, here's Get Carter. Brilliant book. And The Outsiders, S.E. Hinton. Read that. If you haven't got time this holidays to read anything else, just read that. You'll love it. But my favorite book of all time, so my number one, I'm going to give you a clue, is this: The Unbearable Lightness of Being. So that's my number one. If you can get my number 2 and 3 from what I've shown you, then I will give you, if you get them in the wrong order, a £10 Amazon voucher. If you get them in the right order, with this one being a number one, it's a £20 Amazon voucher. All you got to do is drop me an email or something just to say, I think this is your top 3. You've got number 1 in the bag, The Unbearable Lightness of Being. This is a book I go back to read at least once a year. Philosophical, historical, beautiful, just a great, great book. And often people say, just to be a little bit worthy at the end, what's your favourite Dickens? Bleak House. But I mention it last because it's a whopper. It really is. And as you can see, Agatha doesn't really live in the cupboard behind me. So what are we going to do next week? Well, on Friday, we're going to do something a little bit different. We can talk about, so sort of going to talk about TV show streams. So I thought on Friday what we'll do is just hand it over to you. I'm just going to be here and say, what do you want to ask about? Do you want to ask about KGS, about me, about TV, about lockdown, about what am I up to, what should you be up to, a bit of engagement. I'm just going to act as a conduit, as a facilitator for a very open discussion on Friday, because it's our last one of the Easter holidays. And there's going to be, we're going to be daily, weekly basis there, how we're going to actually introduce some themes to that with some competitions as well. So that's it from today. On Friday, I will see you. When is it normally on Friday? Is it earlier or later? I can't remember. But it'll be whatever time we do on Friday. We'll tweet, we'll email. We can do TV shows, and we can include lots of other chat about lots of other things. It's going to be a free and open forum. It's been wonderful to see you today, which I really appreciate. Look after yourselves. Stay well. I'm going to pause for breath, and I look forward to seeing you on Friday. Headmaster out.